You should be all set, Ken.
All right, thank you very much, John. Okay, and again, the Board of Education is back into public session. I missed the introduction at the beginning. Jonathan Steckler was unable to make the meeting this evening, so he had asked me to chair the meeting. And Rachel Ruggieri will also not be able to make the meeting tonight, so Margaret Stamatis will be taking over the responsibilities of Rachel tonight. Okay, so let's begin the public session by citing the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone on the board could take themselves off mute. Okay, it's back here so you can see. All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and
justice for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have what looks like an extensive agenda this evening, but I think some of the policies which we have discussed before, so we should be able to move through those fairly quickly. We'll go ahead and start with the chairman's report. We'll have it as a vice chairman's report tonight. And I do want to thank everyone on the board for their contributions this year. This is our last meeting of this school year. Our next meeting will be in August. And so I wanted to just essentially thank everyone for that. And we will have, we believe we will have our summer retreat between now and then. And I would also, exciting piece of news, I do believe that our next meeting will be our first in-person meeting in quite some time. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing all of you around the table, as well as public comment actually being public and being able to see our constituents in front of us. I think that's going to be a good thing. And so I'm looking forward to that in August. All right, can we move on to the superintendent's report?
Sure. Hello, everyone. And I, similarly to Ken, thank everybody for all their efforts this year. We know it was not easy, and it's a lot of time and commitment. And some of us are getting paid on this Zoom, but some of us are not, and they're truly volunteers. And so, again, big thank you. And it was one of those years that a lot of time and energy. So again, many thanks. ESY began today. So we've been talking a lot about Bridge, but we have to be reminded that there is a program that happens every single summer for our students with learning differences. And again, not a surprise, but well organized by the Special Services Department. And our children joined us today and all looked well at each of our sites. There's always arrival, dismissal, hiccups here and there, but for the most part, all was good. Bridge is actually ending. The first session is ending this Wednesday, and then we will begin our July sessions. A big thanks to Dr. Hanaway and Corey for setting the bar really high. So hopefully the July sessions will go off just as well. Certainly I would say at the high school, if you don't follow our Instagram pages, although I think we actually have a RPS Bridge Instagram page now too. If you don't follow us, be sure to do so. Exciting things happening at all levels. The high school is wrapping up with their intensives, lots of cooking and dissecting and growing all kinds of things. And everybody should be really proud. The educators, the kids, families, I know we are. Ken already mentioned that our next Board of Education meeting, I hope, is in public session, and I actually hope it's in our new offices. So fingers crossed to having that space ready in the Board of Education room, which will be new, ready as well. Shortly tonight, I know we have received a number of correspondence over the Safe Return Plan. You will hear more about the state required Safe Return Plan and how that will fit into our district plan that will be far more detailed and comprehensive for families a little bit later tonight. And I know that there's a lot of back and forth that we've been receiving at least the superintendent's been receiving from families. And I've been doing my best to keep up with those emails. We also have a Safe Return Plan email box that is part of our requirements with the State Department of Ed. I would encourage families to reach out and give us your feedback in that box as well. And I know that families have reached out to the Board of Education. So we're doing our best to respond And when possible, when it requires more than an email, we've been trying to reach out by phone. So hopefully families have heard back from one of us one way or another. So look forward to that conversation tonight and how it feeds into the bigger picture. And that's it for me, Ken.
Okay. All right. So we'll have a report from the committee chairs now. And I'm aware of two committees that met since our last meeting. That would be the strategic planning and the budget and finance. So I will go ahead and give the committee chair report for strategic planning. We did get a presentation from regarding the enrollment at Scott Ridge Middle School and East Ridge Middle School, as well as a history of sort of the feeder patterns into those schools, but back historical from when they were built, the intentions for which they were built, how the districting has changed through over time, and how it's currently affecting the enrollment at the schools, and then how that enrollment is affecting the education of our students. So that was very informative. As far as making decisions regarding that enrollment, the committee discussed waiting until our new enrollment reports come out in November, approximately, because of COVID and sort of the uncertainty with the last year. We felt that we needed stronger data in order to really be able to make decisions about the enrollment. Separately, what we would like to do as a committee, because that's a long time from now, is take a look at coming up with redistricting criteria and a redistricting plan, something that would allow the board and the district more transparency to ourselves, as well as to parents, and get something on a regular schedule so that we will know and we'll be able to better anticipate when we're going to be needing to address that. So something that would be a little more proactive than reactive. So we're going to come up with criteria that once we meet, we're still determining what those criteria, we're going to be determining what those criteria are going to be, so that they would trigger some type of automatic review of our current districting and how redistricting may be able to help with whatever the situation turns out to be. So that's something that we're going to be tackling while we're waiting for the enrollment report to come in. So that's some exciting news, and we're moving that ball forward. From a finance committee report, we did discuss with Dawn Norton, we discussed the financial report ending May 31st, as well as the transfers from that date, and then the COVID-19 expenditure.
I don't know if anyone else is having an issue. Ken?
Yeah, Ken lost audio and he froze.
Ken?
I'm gonna start that GoFundMe, Ken. You're gonna get a new internet connection.
I think I will.
I think it's the town.
I think I might have to. I think I might have to.
Ken, you might have to repeat that last sentence or two.
The last sentence or two did we hear about the finance committee update?
Most of it.
Most of it. Okay. Well, you're going to hear everything that the finance committee heard, you're going to hear tonight from Ms. Norton later on the agenda. And I did ask if there were any other committees that met, and I do not believe so. Is that true? Oh, Kathleen, I'm sorry.
The Energy Task Force.
Oh, okay.
It was 2 Thursdays ago. I think that was the 17th. And
Okay.
And Dr. De Silva attended, and
Mhm.
basically they wanted to have her understand exactly what Governor Lamont's plan is going on to 2030. And we reviewed all of that, and particularly how the schools might be involved, and particularly, some of the actions that we've already done in terms of solar on the roofs, the lighting changes, but looking forward, how much more of that can be done? How can we continue to convey that to the community, how much is being saved? And secondly, we talked a bit about, although it's still in its nascent stages of when we are able to negotiate with our bus company, how we can be involved in helping to have electric buses. And I think Dr. De Silva, listened and, was a ready participant and is willing to listen as we move forward, because the school's energy savings will save the town a lot of money and also save our planet.
I'm riding the electric bus tomorrow, Kathleen.
You are doing that. Oh,
Out
good
of
for you.
Stratford. Yeah.
That's basically, yeah. I mean, it was a good meeting.
Good. Any other liaison or any other liaison? Sean?
Yeah, we did have a prevention council meeting. I think it was last week. Liz, Tina, you were there. I think it was last week. We set out the calendar for the rest of the year, so there will be a monthly event of some sort, either an online promotion or an offline promotion as we get back to normal. But look, keep your eye on the Prevention Council Facebook page for more information. They do have some regular updates.
Okay. Thank you. Any others? Okay. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion?
Yes, I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the May 10th, 2021 Board of Education meeting.
May I have a second? Sean? Before we move to a vote, are there any comments or questions? I'm sorry, Nora?
I had one noticing or correction.
Okay,
On page 3, the
Sure.
third paragraph,
okay,
the paragraph that begins phonemic awareness.
yeah,
I believe that in that sentence, it means to say to develop before they can move on to reading the words instead of reaching the words. But I'm not sure. Okay,
I think you're correct.
so yeah, that was the only one.
I think I saw your hand, Kathleen.
Yeah, Nora, you caught some of the things I said, and in the paragraph before that,
Okay,
I'd like it to be said right near the end, where it says students who have exposure to phonemic awareness skills are better early readers by the end of second grade. I like to begin that paragraph with research has shown,
okay,
if everybody agrees. And then I did a bit of wordsmithing to that paragraph, but if people feel fine with the way it is, I was just trying to make it with more clarity, but I may have been too much of a wordsmith. Because I was saying phonemic awareness is the first of several skills, anyway, maybe we can just leave it the way it is. I mean, the reading made me just start rewriting the whole paragraph, but I think if we just put reading in there, it might just be fine.
again, I'm gonna ask Margaret, what would the normal process be to, other than say a minor edit of reaching to reading, which Nora is correct on that.
Yeah, we could still, I mean, if we wanted to do more of a bigger edit, I mean, if Kathleen wanted to put that out and suggest it, and then we could all discuss it.
It does, you know what, it's just, maybe I was being, making it more educationally. Let's just leave it as is, because it would be too hard to put it out there. It's just really clarifying explicitly what's happening. So I think it's fine. It's fine how it is. There's nothing that's incorrect. I was just making it more robust, but that's fine.
Okay.
But I really think research is shown as important,
right,
because it doesn't mean all children.
right, exactly. So Margaret, so could we make something, like research has shown, can we make that edit?
You can make the minor edits, and then when you go to ask for our vote, you just say
Right.
to approve the minutes as amended.
So that adding that phrase would count as a minor edit. I guess
Yeah,
that's the
yes,
question. Didn't phrase it properly. Okay. Okay. All right, was there anything else from the board on that, on the minutes? All right, so I'll call for a vote of approval of the minutes as amended. And those are the minutes of the May 10 regular board meeting. All in favor? Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6. Sorry, 6, 4. Any against? Any abstentions? Liz abstains. Okay, so the minutes pass. All right. May I have a motion regarding the minutes of the May 17th, 2021 meeting, special meeting, excuse me.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the May 17th, 2021 special meeting.
Do I have a second? Tina? Thank you. Okay, are there any questions on the May 17th, 2021 minutes? Okay, Nora?
Just down at the bottom, item 3, in the second small paragraph, which is just a sentence,
Yeah.
it mentions Miss Caron with an E, but I think it's just CARON. So above it, it says CARON, but in that last sentence, the superintendent congratulated. I think it just needs to be fixed.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay, all in favor of approving the May 17th, 2021 special board meeting minutes as amended, please raise your hands. 6, and any against? Abstentions? Liz? The minutes pass. Thank you very much. May I have a motion regarding the May 24th special meeting minutes?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the May 24th, 2021 special meeting.
May I have a second? Kathleen? And are there any comments regarding these minutes? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes for the special board meeting on May 24th, 2021, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 6. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, Nora abstains. All right, and the minutes pass. All right, so that's the minutes. Move on to our discussions and possible action items. All right. Do we have? All right, so do I have a motion on the collective bargaining agreement with the nurses union?
I move that the Board of Education approve the tentative agreement between the Ridgefield Board of Education and the Ridgefield Nurses Local 424, Unit 56, for the period July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023.
May I have a second? Kathleen? Thank you. Is there any discussion from any members of the board? Okay, all in favor of approving the tentative agreement between the Ridgefield Board of Education and the Nurses Union, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I have everybody. 7. All right, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. And now we will have our policies for the second read. All right, I think we did have, so those should all be in your packet. And there were some amendments made from, at least on some where necessary, from our initial read. These will be for our second read. And Margaret, at this point is we would be adopting these policies.
Yeah, this is second read, and then assuming there are no issues, then we would be voting to adopt them.
Okay. All right. So may I have a motion for our green cleaning program policy?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 3524.2 green cleaning programs.
Can we have a second? Okay, Sean? Okay, any questions or comments from members of the board?
And I'll just make the comment. I wasn't at the last board meeting, but I know I watched it. This is the one policy that did have a change coming out of that first read. And I think it was in response to a couple of board members wanting clarification around part 4 about, bringing in items that might be used for personal hygiene. So we added that language in as suggested.
All right, so all in favor of approving policy 3524.2 green cleaning programs, please raise your hand. That's 7, that's unanimous, thank you. May I have a motion for policy 4118.5 employee use of district computer systems?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 4118.5 employee use of district computer systems.
May I have a second? Nora? Okay, all in favor of approving policy 4118.5 employee use of district computer systems? Raise your hand. That's 7, that's unanimous. Thank you. May I have a motion for regarding policy 4118.51 network and electronic communications?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 4118.51 network and electronic communications.
May I have a second? Kathleen? All in favor of approving policy 4118.51 network and electronic communications, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 7, that's unanimous, thank you. May I have a motion regarding the deletion of policy 4118.8 personal network devices?
I move that the Board of Education delete policy 4118.8 personal network devices as this policy is no longer operative.
Okay, are there any questions about that one from the Board of Ed?
I think we need a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. May I have a second? All right, Kathleen. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Margaret. Are there any questions from the members of the Board of Ed? Okay. All in favor of deleting policy 4118.8 personal network devices, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 7. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. May I have a motion regarding policy 6111 school calendars?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6111 school calendars.
May I have a second? Nora? All in favor of approving policy 6111 school calendars? Raise your hand. Okay, that's 7. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, may I please have a motion regarding policy 6172.6 online courses and credits?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6172.6 online courses and credits.
May I have a second? Tina? All those in favor of approving policy 6172.6 online courses and credits, please raise your hand. My screen moved, but that's 7. Thank you. It's unanimous. Okay, so that is all of our policies. And I think now, according to our agenda, that we're going to now be discussing our safe return plan. I believe that's Dr. De Silva.
Yep, I'm going to start us off, and then Dr. Hanaway will jump in and get into a little bit more of the detail. So the board may remember that we discussed having to submit a required safe return plan to the State Department of Ed for the purposes of applying for the ESSER 3 grant, and that we hoped that we would have received guidance from the State Department of Ed when writing that plan. That said, we had not received the guidance, but yet the plan was expected to be written, publicly shared, with an opportunity for feedback from families. And there were two parts to the feedback from families in the community, actually. Not only on the health and safety pieces, but primarily the feedback was about how the money was to be spent. And so you may also remember that we had a conversation that when writing the grant, we would likely be looking at 3 of the 4 priorities, one of which we didn't think we really could apply based on the funding. We're receiving just under $1 million. Originally, our estimated number was quite a bit higher, but we're receiving just under $1 million. And those funds were primarily intended to be spent, and we haven't fully applied for the grant yet, so we don't know if it'll be approved, but it'll be it's intended to be spent on offering students extension learning outside the traditional school day. So that could be like in our Bridge program, where we're offering a summer program for students. It could be an extension of the school day by way of morning or afternoon, or even tele opportunities for kids who may not have bus transportation home, but could get home and get an extension of their learning at that time. Possibly to provide equity and technology if we needed, but being really creative with the funding to support kids supplementally and not supplanting their current educational experience. But as I shared, that plan had to be communicated by the 23rd of June. And so we had to do that a number of different ways. We had to publicize that on our district website, which we did. We had to put it onto the grant page, even though grant isn't written, the State Department of Ed has the ability to see it within our grant portal. And third, we actually emailed it to the State Department of Ed to ensure that they received it, all of which was required of us in order to apply for ESSER 3. If we didn't do that, that stipulation would mean that we wouldn't be able to apply for funding. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the purpose of the Safe Return Plan, how it may vary or differ from our full comprehensive plan, and some of the pieces that we certainly have received feedback from our community members on that we hope will add some clarity to that feedback. So Dr. Hanaway, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll circle back and forth where it seems appropriate.
Sure. So I'm not going to actually present. I'm not going to project onto the screen. I know you all have it. It's not a terribly long document. So I'm going to speak to really what the intention, building off of what Susie said, is what we're told has to be part of the design of the plan, what our goals were, the big takeaways from as the plan is designed right now. And then the biggest, actually, I think 98% of the public feedback that we've received so far about the plan has to do with masks. So obviously I'll speak to that as well. So if you'll just permit me a few minutes of me kind of hitting point by point, that might be helpful prior to getting into a larger discussion. So first and foremost, the purpose of the plan is to comply in order to apply for ARP ESSER. You know, a big important piece for us that we've learned this past year is around strategies for mass public communication. One of them being sharing information that's reliable and clear. So we were required to communicate out at this point. And so what we communicated was what we knew as of right now. We said in the introduction of the plan that this is just the beginning, that there is going to be 2 things that families can expect as the summer progresses: an updated plan with a lot more information about components that aren't included in the plan so far, about how we're going to safely return the fall. And then separately, parents can expect building specific communication from your principal about the logistics of whatever component of the plan that they have to implement, which is going to be obviously slightly different per school, per level. So those things are going to be coming. So we want to make sure that we don't confuse the community by reversing and changing our plan any more frequently than will be necessary. We experienced that unavoidably this past school year, but to the extent that we don't have to do that multiple times, it's a big part of our goal right now. So within the plan, you'll note that there are some main ideas that we are communicating now to families because we feel confident about communicating now about our learning model. First, that we're returning to a full school day, adding the 40 minutes back in, that we reduced this year. If you'll remember, we reduced by 20 minutes on the front and back ends of the day to accommodate a staggered arrival and dismissal. That doesn't mean we're going to revert to normal arrival and dismissal fully as they were prior to COVID. We are going to have to work out logistics around that, but we are returning to that full day. We will not, the second piece is we'll not be returning to cohorts or a hybrid option to start the school year. Something that I'll just speak personally, maybe a little PTSD in my head, is just the changing nature of what the pandemic could look like in the wintertime. So while we are not returning to hybrid this fall, or cohorts, we are aware that it's possible that come the wintertime, the numbers could change, requiring some adjustment, but we don't see any reason to plan for that. We will not, the third piece is we're not going to be offering virtual or remote as an option this coming school year. So this past year, parents could opt into that for whatever reason that suited their family. And we received guidance from the State Department of Education this spring, indicating that districts will not have a mandate from the state to offer that. And we are communicating to the community that we will not be offering an optional virtual learning platform. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have to think through the smart ways to maybe leverage virtual learning for a number of different reasons, whether it be for supplemental instruction, as Susie described before. We are working through the best way to educate kids who are required to quarantine this coming year. So it's not to say that anything that's related to virtual will never exist again, but as far as parents having that option, that will not be offered. Those students who have medical conditions that preclude them from attending school safely as per their doctors, there are avenues that existed pre-COVID to support students in that way. And so families would pursue contacting their principal and their school nurse to discuss school programming options in those instances. We're going to aim for 3 feet of distance as far as social distancing goes between students, and then aiming for even more than that as much as possible, 3 to 6 feet, knowing that 3 feet distance may not be achievable in all classrooms. And I think most notably, we talked about multiple times this past year at a school like Scotts Ridge, and some of our elementary classrooms for sure that are pushing 24, 25 students at the upper grade levels. And as of today, we are still going to be following, again, pending updated information from the State Department of Education through the Department of Health. We're still going to be following the same contact tracing, quarantining, isolation protocols for a positive COVID case as we did when the school year ended. We are still having COVID cases in district. We had COVID cases last week at Bridge. So we're continuing to follow those protocols the same. So we communicated in the plan as of today that we're going to continue to follow the requirement from the State Department of Ed for masks to be worn inside of school buildings for vaccinated and unvaccinated students and staff. In May, I believe it was exactly May 21st, but I have to pull it up again. But in May of this past school year, we received information from the State Department of Education indicated that masks must be worn inside by students and staff, vaccinated and unvaccinated. It also indicated that masks could be taken off while outside, so long as students were not stationary. It was not a guidance as it was written. The words must were written, indicating that it's a requirement. So instead of veering from what we've basically done, which I believe has served us well for the entire 2021 school year, which is align with sometimes ever-changing State Department of Ed guidance. For example, the risk levels in the fall went from clear levels to blurred levels. That likely will continue to happen with the State Department of Ed. But the last requirements that we received was from May, and they were pretty straightforward and clear. It also included in that communication that they know that they're going to have to communicate out to districts this summer based on what the state of the pandemic is at that point, what their requirements will be related to masks. So why are we including this as of right now? Many families have communicated with us how they've heard that there are other local districts right now that have communicated out optional mask policies. I can't speak to why they've communicated out optional, at least as far as the district administration goes, given that we've been provided a requirement from the State Department of Education. And, you know, our youngest learners who are unvaccinated have had the most difficult time in quarantine and participating remotely. And so that is a real concern in terms of any heightened or further exposure when there are COVID cases that continue to spread. If you were to ask all of us personally on the Zoom what we would like to do, that's not necessarily the perspective that we can speak from as individuals or as people. But I would encourage folks, and we can share it out, to refer back to what we were provided by the State Department of Ed in May, which was a requirement. It was written pretty clearly. So, and to the best extent possible, we're going to continue to maintain a flexible posture, not overcommitting necessarily earlier than we need to. We believe we provided the community with the information they need to plan for themselves to start the school year, the length of the school day, the virtual option, the notion that there are no cohorts. We know people are trying to plan their lives for the fall, childcare, transportation, things like that. So that's why the plan includes as much as it does and not necessarily more at this point.
Just a couple of pieces, if I could add, Dr. Hanaway. I think what can be challenging about what Dr. Hanaway just shared about us providing families with as much information as we could to plan, we realize that mask wearing is a variable for some families. And so that variable in and of itself perhaps may indicate a different choice for a family in the fall. And while certainly from our perspective, we don't want that to happen, ultimately there's like a set of dominoes. And once the State Department of Ed releases one of those dominoes, we anticipate that there's many that are going to fall in different directions. And unfortunately, we are in the unfortunate position to not be able to plan fully, or we're planning for lots of different scenarios that may come our way. One is, yes, mask wearing, right? Let's say that's the one that we have right now in our hands. The last piece of information that we've received from the Department of Ed says faculty must wear masks when they're in the building. If that's the plan, then we also have to identify, or will they identify for us, is contact tracing going to look the same? Is quarantining going to look the same? Because if it does look the same, we no longer have, as you know, a hybrid option for faculty. For a lot of different reasons, we're saying that's not a good idea. But if children are in quarantine, we're going to need to plan for that. So that's a variable that we're going to have to plan for. Similarly, if the State Department of Ed says masks are optional, that's fine too. But there are some things that we're going to have to do to plan for that also. So if masks are optional, are they going to ask us to quarantine students who don't have a mask on or do have a mask on? And what does that mean for offering an alternative learning option for those children that are in that position? Similarly, if they say it's a local decision, we're going to have to create some kind of structure that we would bring to the Board of Education so that we could communicate what a local decision would mean and how that would impact our decision-making on a change or not a change. So there's a lot of information that we actually don't have at this time. And I'm going to predict, I don't know for sure, that the Connecticut Department of Public Health and or the State Department of Ed are waiting to let us know where they're going based on different variables that may be happening now, whether that's in the state or in other spaces. And so for us, we were in a unique position in that we have to apply for a grant. We have to submit a safe return plan. We have to follow the requirements that are available to us at this moment in time. And yet there's a lot that's not in that plan, and we acknowledge that and we realize that. But if there's anything that we've learned this past year, is not to just jump on what someone is doing for the sake of jumping on, because there were many situations in which we could have done that. Whether that was Wednesday's a deep cleaning day, we waited, We didn't jump on this Wednesday's a deep cleaning day, and we didn't have to undo. And so our children came to school on Wednesdays. And there's a lot of other things that were in that we were in that similar situation. And the last thing we want to do is backtrack or just kidding, or ignore that email that we just sent because now it's this. So as much as it doesn't feel like it's enough information for families to plan, and I know that it doesn't satisfy some of the families, half of the families, whatever the situation may be, it is the information we have right now. And for the Board of Education's benefit, for the community's benefit, the guidance and or requirements that we've had, I think have served us well. And then we've adjusted and made things as Ridgefield as we could within there to really provide the best experience that we could have for our children. And so that's where we are right now. Open to questions, thoughts, wonders. The one answer I don't have for you is, when is the State Department of Ed going to decide? And you might remember that's what we went through last year too. We don't know. It doesn't mean that we're not starting to plan. Our reopening meetings begin again. We had a week off, a week hiatus. They begin again tomorrow morning, and we start planning for the various scenarios that may come our way. It's not ideal. However, I trust that the team will think of every option that we can and provide the best experience possible for our children. So now I'll open it up to questions.
Does anyone on the Board of Ed have questions? Liz?
I think Tina had her hand up first. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Everybody's squares are all around. Tina.
That's okay. Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Thank you, Dr. Hanaway, for sharing this. I know there's a lot of confusion, so I'm going to peel away everything and go back to the crux of the matter. Parents want to know about the mask, right? As of now, and we're getting emails, I'm getting texts, I'm sure all of us are hearing that some boards and districts are making decisions regarding masks. And I just want to make this very clear for parents who are watching. It's not a Board of Ed decision, right? It's not a district decision as of now. It's a State Department of Health decision. I think that's very important because we're hearing this constantly. I think that's the one first piece we need to clarify to parents who are watching and sending us emails saying that it's a board decision. I think that's my first clarification, or board or administration decision. I think that's my first clarification, question, comment.
So the last document that we've received from the State Department of Education, and it's what we're doing in our bridge program, right? And what we're doing in our ESY program, is that any adult or child indoors must use masks. Whether or not that's going to change, again, it's not up to me, right? I would love to see the kids without masks. That said, at this point, it does not appear that our decision can be shifted based on the most recent State Department of Ed requirement. And as Dr. Hanaway said, that document was very clear. Any individual who's indoors in a school facility, and then they have healthcare facilities and all of that, must wear masks. So at this point, it has not been opened up to school communities to either make it local or optional that I'm aware of. As Liz shared, how other districts are communicating, I can't speak to that. But I also know that in other communities, they made decisions last summer that were perhaps different than ours, and then had to backtrack because of different things that were coming from the state. And so we're just trying to be as clear as we can in the communication that we have. Ultimately, this board wouldn't have seen a plan if we weren't required to submit it for funds. That's just the reality. Or we would have processed it a little bit differently and we would have had more detail. It's not detailed because we don't have the information. And again, there's a lot of, once you hit the one domino, one direction, it's going to set us off into lots of different places that will communicate to this Board of Education and certainly to our families as much as possible throughout the summer.
Okay, thank you. Liz?
Thank you. Thanks, Liz and Dr. De Silva, for pulling this together. One of our jobs as the Board of Education is to represent our families and to fight for what we think is right, not just what is easy, which is we're going to follow the rules and we're going to say it's the state's decision, we're out of it. I think the reality here is we do have some power here. We have the power to harness the voice of the 98% of notes we've gotten to the Board of Ed. I don't see the emails to the safe return box, which I find a little bit disconcerting as well, because that should probably all be shared with the Board of Ed as part of the stakeholder input. but I'll leave that to you guys to decide. But I can tell you the amount of email traffic that we've gotten, the amount of personal reach outs that I have personally received on this topic, as well as my visibility into several other states where not a mask can be seen. The reality is these kids are going to go back with their families all summer long and not be wearing things over their faces, and then come back to school in the heat, in whatever the degrees are there, be close together again and be wearing masks after a summer where that's probably not happening a lot. And so that to me is illogical at best and not representing our constituents at worst. So the ask here is, are we as a Board of Education going to stand up and at least write the state board or whoever it is and Governor Lamont and stand up for the community from which we're hearing a great deal, 98% of which believe our children, especially our youngest learners, are actually suffering academically, socially, and mentally from the continued wearing of masks, especially as they re-enter schools after having a summer without them in most cases. So I would ask that perhaps we can't say, well, it's just the state and we're going to follow the rules and be done with it. I don't think we're done with it. That can be fine for the ESSER grant form, but I do think that we as a board should take an action to collectively write and stand up for our children that this doesn't seem quite be following the science anymore, especially after 12 or 8 or however many weeks, and looking at the data and looking at the instances and looking at what's happening in our neighboring states. This just doesn't seem like it is just the end of it. So I'll just pause there. I don't know what the process is for creating that as an action item for this board, but I'd like to recommend that we do so and that we collectively write that letter to stand up for the children in our district, as well as the parents that are telling us exactly how they feel.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Sean?
Just one point of clarification, Liz and Dr. De Silva, thank you again for doing the heavy lifting on this. I know it's a lot of paperwork that you didn't sign up for. There's no remote learning in the fall. Is that correct? The state is going to take that role on?
That's the state taking the role on. That piece, Sean, no, I don't think that'll happen. As for the virtual learning, so there was, let me just go back to that. There was, Sean, though, the conversation about having the local RESCs create some type of structure for those students who may elect to have a virtual option. I don't know if that's still on the horizon, given the trajectory of the virus and in the positive way, in the positive direction. In terms of remote learning here at RPS, the State Department of Ed is saying you're no longer required to provide that option. If you remember in the fall, we were required to do that. So we're no longer required to do that. That said, there are things that we're going to have to sort through. Again, like I said, there's going to be, as soon as we hear definitively what direction we'll be in, if we do have to quarantine kids, what is going to be the option for them? We do have, and if they're exposed at school and it's still necessary to quarantine, what is going to be the option for them? We have to sort that through. So that might mean that there has to be some remote learning, but it likely will not be the classroom teacher, because we also know what the impact has been on the children who are physically in school and the children who are online, and the teacher having to navigate those two, despite the fact that they've done it really well. It's not ideal for anyone. So if we can limit that impact, we're planning on doing that. So that's a variable that we still have to sort through, but as an option for families, no, that's not.
Right. I wanted to just clarify that. And the quarantine is my main concern is, what do we do for these kids for 14 days? And it's been awful for the kids. It's been awful for the teachers. I get it. And I feel for you. But secondarily, I want to just back up Liz and say that we won't be the first one to write the CSDE. We won't be the first one to write the governor with our position. And I think our position should match what our constituents are overwhelmingly telling us. So I'm absolutely in favor of writing something to CSDE, to the governor, and to our local elected representatives who need to chime in on this as well.
Just one piece of data that I do think is important, and we've shared this with our lead in the Connecticut Association of School Superintendents group, is we did do a lot of contact tracing last year, as you know, and a lot of quarantines, as you know. Very few students tested positive as a result of a part of that experience. The impact on everyone was pretty significant. We have shared that data, Sean. So I don't know, and I know other communities like ours have shared their data with our CAPS group, who has then subsequently shared it with the State Department of Ed, because I think that's an important variable in their decision making. Again, I don't know where their decision making will land, and you know, I'm optimistic that the reason that they're holding back is just so that they can provide really clear and consistent communication to us. I don't know that for sure, but I just wanted to speak briefly about that.
Well, yeah, I agree. It was a lot of, in retrospect, Monday morning quarterbacking, misdirected energy. But we didn't know that at the time.
No.
But also the communication hasn't always been clear, and I'm not confident that the go forward is going to be any more clear, which is why we as a board and as a district need to be clear about our requirements, what it is we need and what it is our community is asking for.
Thank you, Sean. There any, I thought I saw Margaret's hand. Did you?
Sorry, again, thank you for all this work. And I know that the plan that you put in front of us, there's more detail to come, but I did just want to point out that I thank you for stressing that all schools will open this coming year with a focus on the student mental wellness. I think that's a really, really important philosophical point, and one that I know will guide us as in whatever direction the plan has to go. So I just want to make sure that, you know, the public is aware of that, but also to thank you for that, because that's something that we've heard time and time again at the board level. The one thing I might say is, you know, I don't mind letting the State Department of Education know how we feel, or the governor know how we feel. I guess my question on that is, while we have received some emails over the past couple of days, I don't know that we have a full sense overwhelmingly of where the parents in the district feel yet. I feel like we might need to do a little bit more insight into that. I know we've certainly heard from a segment, and that might be completely true of the larger when it extrapolates, but I would like to get a little bit more understanding of truly where our community feels on this issue before we go ahead and take on the voice of the community, because I'm not sure I know that yet, whichever way that might be.
Margaret, can I ask a clarifying question on that? It truly is. So we have an overwhelming number of emails that I think we've received. And again, I don't know what the safe return one is. How many does it take for you to feel like we've got a representative sample?
I'm not saying and again, we've gotten the emails, but I don't know if that email is the only way. Perhaps there needs to be a survey out to parents that goes out to the whole community. There might be, who knows, we've had in the past where there's been organized groups who have been behind emails that have come to us that represent one or differing points of view. So I guess I would just like to say, to get more of an understanding, perhaps through other methods.
Good. Tina?
Liz, I don't disagree. I've read the emails. I agree. There's an overwhelming, parents need to know, parents are concerned. Tagging on to Margaret's point in the social emotional well-being of children, you know, the younger the kids are, we've been reading these emails, the research is showing that the younger kids are the ones who struggle the most. You know, you can't see expression, phonetics, how they deal with the mask. All this is playing on to the emails we're receiving, because obviously it has been a tough year and people are hoping to go back to normal. I mean, that's why the push has been. And our current state of the infection is so low that we feel we're moving towards, you know, we see camps going back. So I completely get we need to do this, but we are seeing the emails, but I do think I think a survey, I mean, I don't know how this will work. I do think as a board, we need to take a little responsibility about this and make this sooner rather than later, because I think the sooner we can communicate with our parents, it is best for everyone, because of, you know, the stress levels going into a new school year. But how do we do this? Do we do this with a survey? I do like your idea. Maybe we send it. Obviously, it looked different because the chance for vaccinating kids is higher. 12 is available, right? There is an option for parents to vaccinate if they so choose. So obviously, that's a different subset from the kids who are under 12. How does that look? But I think maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to understand the need, just understand what our community feels, have a stronger answer so that we can truly represent all parents. Maybe they didn't have a chance to email us. Maybe some feel, and maybe this is what majority will feel. There's no set number, but I would just like us to give us, you know, when we are representing them, I think I would feel much more comfortable if we can have some sort of quick survey, which is really direct, so that we understand we truly are representing the majority, what our parents want. So I do agree with both your points, if that makes sense. I'm not disagreeing. I just think we need to be just kind of dot our I's and cross our T's so that we do the best as far as possible, if that makes sense.
Kathleen?
I agree wholeheartedly, and thank you everyone for their work, that the best scenario is that all our children are unmasked and in school and learning together and hearing and seeing their teachers and experiencing the joy. But I don't purport to be a health professional, a scientist, someone who understands what's going on globally. And, you hear things every day. I really don't feel as a board member that I could say responsibly that it's best to unmask our children until I hear from the scientists, from the people who do the research, looking at the variants that are in other countries. We know how quickly it's a global economy. I just think we need more. And then secondarily, of course, we need to listen to our parents, but we are responsible for everyone's health and these children's health and the teachers' health. And I'm not ready to say unmask without any kind of scientific backing that could support that, not anecdotal.
Nora, I think you had your hand raised before.
Yeah, my instinct is really to side with Liz and Sean in the idea of writing the letter and being proactive. What that letter says is, I do think we need a little more information. I would agree with Liz that the overwhelming, number of emails, all wanting no masks was definitely clear. So I guess, I feel like a proponent of the option and the choice. And I think that allows parents to, really decide for their families. At that point, they would also know what would happen, in quarantine and what that situation would be. So I do think we should begin to mobilize an effort, depending on what we glean from the larger community, in creating a letter or some type of action.
Okay, thank you. I know we're talking about the overwhelming majority of the emails that we received. I just want it noted, and we'll touch on it later in our correspondence report, that we received 14 emails regarding the return, 13 of which were about the mask policy. And with all due respect, I don't think that 13 is a enough of a sample size to say that it represents the majority of our district.
I feel a little responsible to add that I man the safe return email box. We've probably got, it's me. Yep. I'm behind the curtain. I actually put my title in the bottom of it so people know who I am getting the emails back. I just quickly look, we've got about 40
okay. Yeah. So now we're at 55.
54, plus there was a group of folks, I don't exactly know how many, in front of town hall with signs asking for unmasking as well. So I think there was a public outcry. We don't have meetings in person, so we haven't heard public comment yet either. So I do want to respect the fact that a public comment is coming after this discussion, which is a little bit maybe out of sequence for this conversation as well. So I think maybe there's folks that may have something to say there as well.
No, and I absolutely agree with you. And as I think, as Margaret said, that could absolutely represent the majority of our entire constituents. But again, I wouldn't even say 50 parents out of our, the thousands of students that we have in our district is representative. And I think it's important, again, as Tina said, that we do hear from them all before we're able to take a stance. All that being said, I think it is important that we do express the importance of the state making this decision sooner rather than later. That's the thing that our parents need to know, because as I believe Dr. De Silva pointed out, we could say, hey, you know what, as a district, we want it to be optional. for example, let's say that, and the state comes back and says, no, this has to be mandatory. That is great. And Liz, speaking to you directly on that, yeah, that is great. We can make a stand, but if the Department of Education says that you have to make it mandatory, we as a district have to make it mandatory.
So what I'm saying, Ken, is we should, as a board, write a letter that expresses the community's perspective, whether we want to do a quick survey tomorrow, because obviously this is time sensitive, or say this is going to be optional if at all possible, so that those parents who are fully comfortable with the risks that they now know about, or with the potential risk and the very low rates of transmission in children, or whichever scientific article they've read that day. I think that's really imperative on this board as an elected group of from our elected body, which are all over 18, and a lot of them those parents. We don't get a lot of letters. 14 and 40 is actually quite a big percentage based on very other issues. Usually we get maybe 1, 2, maybe 5. We're getting 54. That is a big percentage if you started to map out the community response on these meetings. So I think we have to make it in relative and context terms and not say, oh, we haven't heard from people or enough people, when frankly, we very rarely, unless it's a very divisive issue, hear from many of these people. I'd venture to guess that a lot of these people have never written the Board of Education on any other topic either, which also holds a whole lot of weight.
To be fair. But again, then to counter that, if somebody is, let's say, does support masking students in school, and they look at the safe return plan and they see that masking students is part of the safe return plan, why would they necessarily feel the urgency to say something? So we could have.
I mean, there were certainly 2% that felt passionate enough to write about that. So yeah,
well, they wouldn't need to write about it because their passion has already been met. I'm just saying that as an example. You could be 100% right.
I get you, Ken. I'm supportive of putting something on the table that says we will get a survey out by noon tomorrow to all our constituency and give it till Friday to respond and have a letter drafted up that presents those results to the CDSE or CSDE, whatever the acronym is, to make sure that we're representing our constituents and actually take action to stand up for those constituents that are expressing their opinion. Because not everyone's going to fill out a survey either.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Agreed. Sean, I'm sorry. You have
yes, Liz, this is 500 to 1,000% more letters than we get for any other topic. Acknowledged. So we're getting more on this. It is a hotter topic. But that aside, let's also play the statistics on the other side. If 0 of 169 school districts write the governor and our local elected officials and don't write the CSDE, they haven't heard from anybody, and they will just take action on their own. We need to hear from our constituents, act on their wishes. Health stuff aside, that's interesting. It's an interesting data point. Leave that to the state to decide. We are here to represent our community. That's why we're in the seats we're in. Let the state figure out the health stuff. We can consult with Ed Briggs and others. That's great. But I don't think that's a relevant data point in a letter that we want to put out to, again, our elected officials, the governor, and the CSDE.
That's fair. I'm sorry. I think I saw Tina first, then Kathleen.
Ken, I mean, this is just a suggestion. I think we're all going to, we can keep circling about this, but I truly think, we all want to do the best for all our parents. We're hearing from so many parents. We know parents are concerned. I think my suggestion would be, instead of going on over it, because I think we're all in consensus that we truly want to do the best for our kids, the safest way. We should do probably a quick survey. Whatever we get, and draft a letter so that, as Sean says, Liz says, we need to say something that represents the best we can. If we get only 100 people who participate, so be it. We gave a chance for parents to participate. I think that's the first part. That's what I feel really strongly about, that we are giving parents another chance to be part of this discussion, this decision, if you will, so that we can truly represent them as board officials. I'm not talking about administration as just, elected board. Our job is to represent our constituents, and this is our way, giving them an opportunity to weigh in. If they so choose not to take part in it, whatever the reason it is what it is, but we have given them a chance, so that we are doing our due diligence to drafting this, and whatever the results of the survey, it's an overwhelming majority that requires us to say, this is what we would like, masks optional, so be it. This is what we're doing, of course it could change. I have families still stuck in India. It could all change at the drop of a hat. But for now, as status stands, as we are currently, I think it will behoove us to represent our parent community. Take it by, instead of going back and forth, having more emails, always talking about this, just doing this for now. That's just a suggestion. I hope I'm not speaking for all, but I thought this was best for us to just, summarize this, because it would be nice if you can all get done by 10 o'clock today. And I know we truly all want to do the best for all kids, K to 12.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And just one second, Captain, I'm sorry. And I think you're right. I think we do. And I think even just seeing the nods of everyone at the same time, I don't think that there are at least any strenuous objections about writing a letter. I think it's the content of the letter that I think we will need to work out as a board, again, with input of a survey, if that's something that I think we can put together. And we'll have to figure out the logistics of that. And that might be the next part of this conversation that we're having tonight. And I think Dr. De Silva wants to insert something, but I think Kathleen had something to say before.
Kathleen, yeah, go ahead. And then
All I wanted to do is put a little historical perspective on the number of letters that are sent, because both Margaret and I can say over the years when we were secretaries that there were times there were events that garnered hundreds of letters. So that being said, that does not diminish that there are so many people.
Nope.
And I think after tonight's discussion, it'll be interesting to see how it's responded to. And I do enjoy, or I do support some kind of survey being put out there. So if the letter can then represent the survey results, I think that would be a clarifying piece.
So I think that's ultimately my question. We're glad there's nothing we do more than create a survey and send one out. I just have operationally a few questions though. So this is the time of year that we get a lot of communication from families. Last year, similarly, we had a reopening email. Dr. Hanaway was behind that curtain as well. And that's where we used that as a way in which to collect feedback so that we could better plan. And that feedback was incredibly important. In addition, we had a committee, but in addition to that, the communications from families just made us think in a different way, that we perhaps may have not had that same perspective, given that we're not parents in the community necessarily. So some of the emails that we receive are duplicates. That's true too. We take the emails that we receive from the board and I forward them to the Safe Return for the purpose of collecting feedback. Because when I receive them and the board receives them, my reopening committee doesn't. So that's the reason that sometimes there's duplicates there. My question about the survey though, and certainly whoever responds. But what I'm hearing tonight, at least from my point of view, is a position around the no masks, primarily because we're receiving an influx of emails. Let's just say we send out a survey, we get 100 responses and they're 50-50, one question. Or if they're 60-40 or 70-30, how does a letter then get drafted? And what if they're 70-30 and wearing masks and 30 not? And perhaps it's because when people completed the survey, and I'm not suggesting it would be one way or the other, but I am asking, then what? So I understand, and Liz, there's nothing that I appreciate more than standing up for what a community believes in. So my question is though, what is the next step? So we send out a survey, we collect data, let's say 2 days, we put it out 3 days. We get that information and then we come back to a public board meeting then and communicate. We had whatever the data is. And we can ask, by the way, very simple questions. It doesn't need to take a long time. It could be, would you like to see mask? Would you not like to see mask? Would you like it optional? Those three, it's not based on science. It's not based on anything. It's just those 3 questions. But I have to throw out the elephant in the room. What if it's not exactly the way that we're seeing it? Then what changes or doesn't change? And again, I have my own personal beliefs. I think we all do, but how do we get our heads around this again? And it's really just, I'm throwing it out there as a collaborative discussion on what would be next.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation to that is that we actually structure it as, are you comfortable? You want full masks all the time, regardless, or some kind of scale of comfort level with optional masks, right? The intent of the questions is to get to, how do you feel about it, parent? Because we're saying we're not hearing from enough parents, right? So we want to hear from every parent that has an opinion via a consistent method so that we can discern that. and say, are you comfortable with optional masks? Or are you want full masks at all times for all age groups, inside and outside? Whatever, it could be 5 questions, right? I'm sure we could draft it up in some kind of virtual public forum or something.
Yeah, that part
and
is,
then
that
that
part's
could draft
easy.
a letter.
Yeah, that part's easy, Liz, but the part that I'm just operationally, then we come back here to a public meeting, because that has to happen in public.
Yep.
We can, again, it's based on the data we have right now. So right now, the data is telling us, state is saying indoors for all folks, regardless of age, masks. Outdoors, no masks so long as you're moving. So long as you're moving.
Does that include teachers and
includes
staff, by the way?
Yeah.
So even vaccinated people wear masks.
in school buildings, yes, Sean.
When
That's
kids,
where the science has been completely left behind.
when children are in the building.
Yeah.
CDC doesn't recommend this. This is not science.
So let me just pause there and say, science aside, we're trying to create a scientific poll of the community because we haven't heard from enough of community members on their perspective on this. So until we give an opportunity for all of our constituents to provide their input, whether they choose to or not, we then use that, we review those results publicly and draft up a letter with 3 to 5 key points for the CSDE that says, this is how the town of Ridgefield's parents and community feels about your directive to regulate masks only when you're not moving outside. You can be free of your mask. And then when you go inside, after being inside at restaurants and everywhere else over the course of the summer, you've got to start wearing them again. So I think, we've got to, and if the community come back and say, we want full masks all the time for every one of our schools, K through 12, all the time, then, hey, maybe we have more strict mask rules than even the state. But I think what we'll find is the people that are most passionate about it will respond to the survey one way or the other, and will resolve the questions that Margaret and others had, that 40 or 50 people responding within 24 hours or so, give or take maybe 48 hours over a weekend of getting the safe return plan. Then we've given them another opportunity to voice their perspective. And I think if we do that, we have to do it within the next 48 hours or so to really have an impact on the state's decision. We know that the emergency powers end July 20th. We don't know what's going to happen. We know our neighboring states are lifting mask mandates, even as of the last few hours, but they certainly did it at graduations 2 weeks ago in some particular suburbs nearby. And so I think we've got to get there. So it's clearly very inconsistent across the state and across schools, but at least we can get an opinion that says, this is optional for Ridgefield. That's how they feel about it. It should be optional. And if people want to wear masks, they're absolutely at will to do so at all times. If they're not, they have the opportunity to make that choice for their family, or, hey, our community supports masking, move on.
And to your point, Dr. De Silva, I think a letter could be drafted up that would, over the next few days while we're waiting for the results of the survey to come in, that would allow essentially a plug and play of, once we got the results, we could put that into the letter. Because I think certainly an introduction and a conclusion of the letter would be relatively consistent, based on independent of what the actual survey results were.
With the data point that the state should be acting sooner than later to give families guidance, no matter what it is.
Exactly. So those parts of the letter could be written irrespective of what the survey results are, and once we get those, that's something that could be added relatively easily, I think.
May I ask a point of clarification? Just because I have a feeling a few of us are going to be talking about this tonight after the board meeting is over.
Absolutely.
We're talking, or is the board considering a survey to parents about children wearing masks in school, not commentary about faculty and staff?
That one I would have to.
I just want to clarify that we're talking about parents responding about.
Personally, not trying to speak out of turn here, Ken, but personally, a elementary school age child trying to learn how to read with a teacher who is masked is problematic for me. Linguistics are tough to learn with a mask on. So I think that's a dynamic that needs to be factored in somewhere, maybe not this letter.
Sean, I would suggest that we stick to what the state is requiring now. The state is, so one option is that we follow what the State Department of Ed has said, which is requires everyone who's indoors to wear a mask. they have not at this point differentiated between vaccinated, unvaccinated kids, small kids, little kids, big kids, none of that. So I would say that that's one option. The second option that I think I'm hearing is that masks should be optional. And the third option that I think I'm hearing is that no masks in school, or maybe there isn't that third option. Maybe it's just the two. Masks are optional.
I don't think there's anything beyond optional. If a parent wants a child to wear a mask all day, every day, going forward forever and ever,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody on this Hollywood Squares has a problem with that.
Except
No,
for
and I'm sure that a teacher should be able to make that own decision based on their bodily autonomy as well, which is why I struggled with the staff as well. I don't think that that's something that we should regulate for an adult. That's not within our realm. I would say it's their body. They should choose whether or not they are
Well,
comfortable.
and the guidelines for vaccinated adults, vaccinate 12 plus, let's call that adult, indoors by the CDC, by the state, is masks are optional.
So I'm just going to, just to the survey so I can make sure that we get this out and get it returned. There's two questions essentially. What the state has said that we must do as of June 23rd, and the second option, which is to make them optional, correct? Okay. And I think we're saying tomorrow is Tuesday to try to get like a quick turnaround. So perhaps by Thursday?
Wednesday would be great if we could get it out.
The close of day Wednesday, have the data by Thursday, and then I smell a new board meeting on Sunday this week.
The data for Friday, you know what I mean?
So we'll have to have another board meeting. And just one point though, Sean, about the optional masks. I would say that the person that cares, it is the teacher, because ultimately when you're serving a young child in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, if their parent wants them to wear a mask each and every day, perhaps when it's no longer necessary, and I'm not suggesting that's it, but let's just say when it's no longer necessary, that is going to be a next level of challenge, not only for the administration, but for the Board of Ed to have a dialogue around if that's where it was to end up. It's when the state is saying, let's say you no longer need them, but a parent wants them, and I need to have the child remove it so I can see his or her ability to articulate something. So there are
I agree, but I don't think we need to, that's not a gating factor for now.
Yeah.
If the state says we're done with this and if there's an educational reason to be done with it, I think you're going to find it's a small minority that are still hanging on to that. You can have those one-on-one conversations.
Okay. All right. So I think we know our.
Right. Well, I think Margaret had a question. I'm sorry, Liz, and then
No, go ahead. The tactical thing.
And I don't disagree with anything that was just said. This was actually just, Dr. De Silva, you probably already have this noted down, but obviously it's got to be crystal clear in the survey that goes out that this is just for the purpose of finding out the sentiment of the community, not that this is, because again, we're going to be bound by what the state's, potentially bound by what the state says. So I just don't want parents to get the wrong impression that if it comes back, no masks, that happens.
That's a really good point, Margaret.
So one point of I don't know if we can do it, but it would be great to include all of our incoming K and preschool students if we have their email addresses as well, because they're the ones that are affected by this decision that may not be versus maybe some of the folks that are on their way out. So just something to there as well.
We'll try to figure that part out. I don't know if August 1st is that, because that could hold us up getting them manually done. So no guarantee on the incoming, but we'll try.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, from a logistics perspective, Dr. De Silva, when would this survey most likely?
So it'll most likely go out mid-morning tomorrow. And I think I heard close of day Wednesday. So it's a quick turnaround for families. And then at some point, the data is instantaneous, Liz. So we could, if we wanted, we could even close it later on Thursday and have the data. It's, takes 2 seconds in a Google form and have a meeting on Friday, or we could close it on Wednesday.
I just meant send it out by Wednesday or Thursday, not send it out tomorrow. I apologize. My eyes were unclear. I was thinking we could review the data again Friday or Saturday or whatever. My apologies. That was my misstatement.
How would something like this work? Again, I'm trying to understand everyone here, that if we were able to get the survey out, let's say by noon tomorrow, have the results back by noon or have the surveys back by noon on Thursday. And I think if I heard you right, Dr. De Silva, we would be able to see the results of that survey by Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, we can come to a public meeting by it's instantaneous, so we'll create it and we'll have data.
Can we make sure that you can't take the survey more than once? That's been a problem more than one time.
It's a good
Yeah,
point, Sean.
we'll make
Yeah.
sure.
You can limit one response.
Although we'll work this out because I might feel differently for my elementary child than I do for my high schooler. But we'll work out those little nuances, and whatever data we have, we'll be sure to communicate how that data was collected to all of you.
Okay. And then as far as the letter, and again, my naivete at this will show, and perhaps I can lean on Margaret again, so how does the board go about drafting a letter from the board?
What I might suggest is that perhaps someone now make a motion that we write a letter and that perhaps we authorize the board chair to work with the superintendent to draft a letter on behalf of the board.
Look, I'm trying to look for nods on the board before. Is that everyone? Okay. Can I get a motion? Such a motion?
I move to get to voluntold the chair who's not present to work with Dr. De Silva to write a first draft that we will review. Is that right? Did I get it right, Margaret? I don't know.
Is that right, Margaret? Was that
You
close?
might just want to say regarding the community
purpose.
sentiment around.
Regarding the community feedback on masking regulations in the state of Connecticut.
I may I have a second. Tina? Okay, all in favor? That's 7. That's unanimous. All right, so moved. Or passes. Margaret, just as a point of information, and again, because of public rules, what would members of the board be able to provide feedback just in the interest of timeliness prior to meeting again publicly? No. Okay.
No, it's all got to be public.
Okay. And how would we go about scheduling then a meeting? I guess I presume then the meeting would be on Thursday night?
Yeah, I would assume the Board of Ed chair can get together with the superintendent and they can call a special meeting. They would just need to meet the notice requirements, which I believe would be at least 24 hours.
All right, so 24 hours. Yeah, that was and the
It's
poorly
scheduled where we would
question.
have the majority, Ken, where we have the majority of folks able to attend. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Thursday evening. It could be in the morning. It could be wherever folks can.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. All right, and then you would coordinate that with Jonathan. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the CSDE Safe Return Plan? Okay. Thank you all for a robust conversation. And let's move on now to our next agenda item, which is the draft of the 22-23 school calendar.
All right. Well, thankfully, you approved the new policy related to calendars, so I am sharing one with you tonight. So you'll notice that there's nothing really significantly different in the 22-23 school calendar draft. We did pull other DIRG or other districts within our DIRG and neighboring districts. We have some other calendars. Not everyone has theirs published. I would say that the vast majority of those that have February break are DIRG A, our district reference group A, and most of those have the February break at the same time that we do. So you'll also know that this will be the second year with a February break, and we haven't experienced the first year, which is why that change in policy helps. So next year will be the first year that we experience it. I'll be tracking attendance closely. So for those families that are listening, you got a February break, please don't take any extra days before or after. That's why we gave you a February break. We don't want to take it away. So, that'll be interesting to see next year, because I do think that was a real variable when we had the long weekend. Families just made it longer by adding the extra day here and there, and now they have a full week. So I'm hopeful that they have the benefit of having the extended. They even have the Friday, because I think Friday is a professional day for teachers. So that's there. As I said, we'll collect feedback next year. You have the one early dismissal, not every month, but in some of the months for our faculty. That was a big push before my time here. Faculty really felt like they needed that extended time for professional learning. That's still built in the calendar, but we try to make sure that it wasn't on the same day as a shortened week. Outside of that, there aren't many changes that are like significant from the 21-22. I'm sorry, yeah, 21-22 calendar.
Oops. Are there any questions from anyone on the board regarding the school calendar? Okay.
Just one other thing, what you don't notice here that we actually have not received direction from the, I'm sorry to say it, the State Department of Ed yet, is snow days. Probably, too soon to talk about the State Department of Ed, but we have not received direction from them on snow days. Our Western Connecticut group, you know that I'm a part of two different groups. One is our district reference group A. That's your Darien, Westport, Wilton, Easton, Reading, that group. And then we have our neighboring Western Connecticut group. That group did write a letter to the State Department of Ed, also asking for quick movement on their decision around snow days. So even though they gave us that option this past year, they did not commit to it for future years. So we've asked them to commit, and overall, the Western Connecticut group did feel that it was a benefit to having the option and making the decisions locally when it made sense to have a traditional snow day and when it didn't make sense to have a traditional snow day, to offer school districts the option. So here, you'll notice that the last day of school is June 15th. In Ridgefield, it's likely to go after that, but how far after will really depend on whether or not we have that option. And you'll hear my recommendation at some point about what seems to make sense for us.
Now, are there any questions on the school calendar and the snow days, etc.? Okay, there being none, let's move on to the next item on our agenda, the pay to participate study for the fall.
Yeah, so this is just, honestly, it's really an effort just to be sure that you didn't think we forgot about this conversation. Pay to participate was something that our Budget and Finance Committee brought up as a possible item that you'd like studied and whether or not we should continue down the road of pay to participate. I actually didn't think Dane was going to be here tonight, so thank you, Dane, for coming. But generally speaking, what we're sharing here is that you can expect that we'll be presenting what other communities like ours are doing, what model we believe makes the most sense in the fall. So it's just a heads up that that's coming your way.
Can I ask just one question on this? I know that this came up from committee, and I appreciate that you're all working on it. I just want to put it out there that this fall is likely to be a little different still after a really hard year. So if this is something that you need extended timelines, instead of trying to jam it into the fall, I, for one, and I can only speak for myself on this, would be fully supportive of saying this is something we could evaluate later in the year when things are a little bit calmer and or stable. I mean, we've had a year of crazy, so changing policies and stuff may not be the biggest priority. So you have at least my support. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but.
If I can respond to that, Liz, I appreciate that flexibility. The reason why I feel like it's important to try to hit this early, if we can, is just the nature of the budget cycle, where if we're looking to make a change and we don't do that until later in the year, we're not talking about the following year, but 2 years out. So it is something that has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit in terms of action. And I'm not even sure that there would necessarily be an action, but I want to be able to come back to the board with some more data, with some ideas for us to have more discussion to say, yeah, this is something that we care about and we want to put forward so that it could be included in the 22-23 budget cycle.
That's a really fair point. Thank you.
Thanks, Dane.
Thank you, Dane. Any more questions regarding the pay to participate? Okay. There being none, we can move on to our next agenda item, update on booster clubs, Title IX gender equity.
So similarly, Dane wasn't supposed to be here tonight. And so I was presenting just a quick, don't worry, more to come on booster clubs in Title IX. There was a study done a number of years ago, or a report a number of years ago, I think it was in 2018, by Dane around the booster clubs, but we feel like there's an opportunity here to study what the structures are, what their processes are, and then perhaps create one that we could communicate out to the booster club reps that evolve every year. So there's a little bit of a moving target, but create some kind of systematic structure so that everybody's informed in the same way, so we can ensure equity among all kids and among all sports as we move forward. So what you have here really is just a little bit of the history. So some summer reading, and you'll hear more about that in the fall as well.
Any question from members of the board regarding this item?
I just, sorry, one
Margaret?
question. And again, thank you for all this information. I think I've been there for many of your presentations, Dane, and I appreciate all the work you've put in and the progress of it. Something that I've always wondered is, while I know boosters have the dues and we've been looking at those, I also almost wonder if, when you come back to us, can you actually talk about per sport, almost what the total expected contribution per family is? Because we know with different sports, the booster dues may vary depending on what's included in that. And yet parents might also then be having to fork out more money throughout the season for different things. So it's almost like all in at the end of the season. What is that child's family paying for? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And it's certainly something that I can look at as a data point. I think one of the challenges, as with everything else in the world, is we're going to get some interesting data over this last year. I heard from, there were some sports that didn't run at all this year. And so their boosters were inactive completely. There were other sports that, every time I spoke to them in regards to boosters, it was, well, we haven't had a chance to really do any fundraising this year. So, we just need to keep all of that in mind as far as like recent trends. And I would say that for the pay to participate data as well, these last 2 years, the 1920 school year and the 2021 school year, are both blips on the radar that are going to show, some skewed data. So certainly I will keep that in mind. The first spot that I plan is to go back and review all the data that you guys have in front of you now too. And then as I reach out to booster representatives over the course of the summer, we'll see if there's an update that I can give in that regard.
Thank you. I had one other thing, and this actually is less about Dane, perhaps more for Dr. De Silva, and I don't know if it's something that the board wants to look at, but we're obviously talking about sports boosters here, but there are other booster clubs within high school. And I don't know, it feels like in some ways this is a little bit of a different beast because of some of the Title IX stuff, but obviously we've got theater boosters, music boosters, other clubs. So just wonder if at some point we could hear a little more about.
Yes, Margaret, this was definitely a priority because of Title IX, but we did, when I brought this conversation up with actually Dr. Greenwood, he responded the exact same way, as perhaps after we'll start off with the boosters related to sports, and then the next set of, or next opportunity is to look at all the boosters around the extracurriculars.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I don't, just as an administrative point, I don't see Kathleen on anymore. Did we lose Kathleen?
Kathleen had a family event she shared at the earlier meeting, so she was just staying for the first part of the agenda.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that. I apologize. That might help for vote counting later. Okay, are there any additional questions regarding the booster clubs? Okay, I see none. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is use of athletic fund balance.
Thanks, Dean. Oh, you can stay for this too. Ron?
Typically, whenever there's a need for the use of athletic fund balance, we bring that to the board for their approval. We are anticipating that there is going to be a need at the end of this fiscal year to use some fund balance. Approximately mid to upper $40,000 is what we estimate that may become. Before you in your packet is a visual of kind of where the reserves we feel are going to be at the end of the year, but this is only at this point in time. There's a lot of reconciliation that still occurs. There may be some other revenues that still have to come in, and we're not exactly sure where the expenses are going to come in with the closing of encumbrances and invoices as they process through. So this is just a point in time. This is not the actual numbers. This is as of June 25th, which was last Friday. We feel that there's going to be plenty of fund balance in there for that coverage. And so before you tonight is a request to use fund balance to cover any overages with the athletic fund as we finalize and close out that fund.
So just procedurally, even though we don't know the exact amount, what you're asking for is a motion just to allow, we feel we kind of know what the amount is, but we don't want to be so specific, but at least you want to get the approval in before the end of the year.
Yes, please.
And I'm sorry, I may just have missed this, Dawn. What are we using the overage for exactly?
So when his budget was created for this fiscal year, we ended the fiscal year prior knowing that there was going to be some savings due to COVID, as the entire second half of the sports season was pretty much closed down due to COVID. In doing so, there was a conscious decision to underfund revenue to his budget while he had expenses that he needed to run the program, should the program run, all the programs run normal. So where he needs to have revenue and expenses equal each other, we undercut by that $115,000, knowing that he would have to probably pull from fund balance to make the difference. Instead of taxing the taxpayers, he was going to use his fund balance for doing that.
Okay.
At the last board meeting, we brought that $115,958 to the board. That was decided that it would be used for the capital project that the town had asked for help with. And in doing that, that would have covered any overage that he would have had. But because that decision was made for that capital project, I'm just asking for permission. We know he's going to go over. He's over right now, to use some of the fund balance to cover any overages when we finalize all of the numbers.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from board members? Okay, is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the transfer from the athletic fund balance to cover any overage in the athletic budget for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
May I have a second? Sean? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 6. Okay, 6. That is unanimous for the members present.
If I could make a quick comment before we move on. First off, a thank you, because I'm happy to report that they actually did break ground this morning on the Scotts Ridge turf. And so the project has begun. As a point of communication to the community for everyone listening or anybody who might watch this later, we do expect that the project will move from Scotts Ridge down to Tiger Hollow in the very near future. So for all the people who like to go walk the track and use that field, unfortunately, it is going to be offline very soon. So please obey any signage that you see, stay out of the construction zone. Let's be safe, and let's make sure we get that project done as soon as possible.
Fair enough. Thank you, Dane.
Thanks, Dane.
All right. I do believe it's time to discuss the financial report ending May 31st, 2021.
Okay, not a lot changes from financial report to financial report each month. We're still anticipating and still seeing that we'll have some overages in some areas and some savings in other areas. One topic that I would like to say that is different about the May report that wasn't in your earlier reports is that we have received all of the funds from the state of Connecticut that we will be receiving for our excess cost reimbursement. That excess cost reimbursement came up short by $486,197, of which we still are able to cover with all of our general fund that we have for this year. I don't know if there's any specific questions about any of the financials.
Okay, and I think I did do that out of order. I think I was supposed to ask for the motion before Dawn went through that, so my apologies.
Sorry.
No, that's on me. Do I have a motion regarding the financial report?
I move that the Board of Education accept the financial report ending May 31st, 2021.
As we have already discussed it, do I have a second? All right, Tina. All right. And let's go ahead and call a vote. All in favor of approving, or excuse me, accepting the financial report ending May 31st, 2021, please raise your hand. 3, 4, 4, 5, 6. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. And do I have a motion regarding the transfers?
I move that the Board of Education approve the transfers presented June 28th, 2021.
Do I have a second? Sean? Is there Bond?
Sure. I tried to be a little bit more explicit in the descriptions of the transfers to help others understand what the transfer needs were and why there was available funds to be transferred to cover what is needed for the money. Here on this report here, there's just some, in May, there was, the high school had a request for some transfers from instructional materials school-wide to equipment school-wide, and that was to furnish a business classroom into a stock market trading floor to enhance learning experience for students. They also have in May curriculum had a request as they prepared for their bridge program to move money from purchase services district-wide to supplies and materials, professional development district-wide. And then there were some additional transfers requests for June for curriculum. Similarly, to cover costs to provide equitable resources across pre-K-8 to support struggling learners, as well as facilities. Most of what you see on the bottom of the report is cleaning up some of the facilities that we were pretty confident that we wouldn't have any more invoices that would affect these areas and that we could bring some transfers before you. Obviously, once we have all of the invoices completed and the financials reconciled, we'll have more transfers just to clean up anything that we have throughout the rest of the accounts. But here we have utility service, water. We had some funds there that we used to cover the sewer use. And the sewer use is there was a rate hike in the sewer tax that we had to cover. So there was an overage in there. And then there was gas that we had some savings in there to use for fuel oil. And the explanation I had put on that. And then just some an area of repairs, maintenance, supplies, maintenance, plant supplies, such as like security and electric, dues, mileage, uniforms had some savings, but buildings repair and maintenance had a need and to cover a lot of the building repairs and maintenance that we had to go throughout the year. So there's that transfer as well. And then in the last one is a transfer between cost centers. So insurance property is where the building insurance sits under facilities, but the communications is under technology. So the communications had a overage, or communications had a need to cover some overage expenses that had occurred. And so there was some insurance property available money that we used to cover that.
Are there any questions from members of the board? John?
Not so much a question as a statement. I said it during the budget and finance, but the stock trading floor thing, fantastic idea. I love it that that's an ongoing item that we'll be using for years in the future, but to teach some economics of how things work, and I just love it.
Very good point, Sean. And I also want to add, I do appreciate, Dawn, the additional clarity and the reasons for the transfers. I know that also came out of committee, and I do think that that's something that's very useful. Thank you. Margaret?
Sorry, I just had it, sorry, on the last one for communication, the description of expenditure and technology communication. What is technology communication?
That is district-wide, all of the communication devices, the phones, I believe it's also cell phones, any communications that is used district-wide is housed under technology, and they maintain all of the service for that. Also the purchases for any of that equipment.
Okay, thank you. And one other question was up actually in May under curriculum. The reason for the transfer of the 50,000, I understand the summer bridge program, but I wondered, it said the cost to support end of year professional development. And I guess my question there is, did we underfund professional development? Is that something we just need to keep our eyes on for future budgets, or was that something that was just unique because of the COVID year?
Or you can speak to that.
Go ahead, Dr. Silva.
Oh, Corey, do you want to jump in?
Corey, I'm sorry.
Okay. Hi. Hello.
Corey.
Good evening. Good evening. So end of year professional development, there was a little bit of end of year professional development that we talked about in the curriculum committee, and that was Hegarty that we gave in advance to our reading specialists, our coaches, in preparation of supporting all of our teachers in the fall. So that wasn't a huge expense. What was the other part of your question, Margaret?
That was pretty much it. I just wanted to understand on that professional development. Was it something that because we underfunded, or was it just something that was unique to this year? So I think you just answered that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I actually had a comment from a logistics standpoint. So how are any additional transfers approved, being that this is our last meeting of the year?
Part of the policy that we have, Ken, allows us to do that final year-end reconciliation and transfers in order to file our EDO-01 or our EFS report for the state.
Okay.
And then we bring that back to you at the next meeting.
In August. Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments about the transfers for May and June? Okay. So we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the transfers presented June 28th, 2021, please raise your hand. 6, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think our last item for Dawn is the COVID-19 expenditures.
Right, and I'll just give you a quick update. Not a lot has changed. Obviously, there hasn't been any more COVID purchases. So most of what you'll see on the report that has increased is salaries and or the food service area. Those are the two areas that are salary and or monthly expense changes. I will say that I would change the title of the overage coverage after the committee had discussed it and said, how is this being covered? Are we going to cover it? It's all been already paid for. All COVID expenses have been paid for as the year had gone on. We covered them right up front with our general fund money that we had. And then some areas we had to push off other expenses in order to cover it, but we were able to have enough funds throughout the year to pick up where some of that was left off. So really, this report is just an update that some salaries were picked up for the substitutes. There was a little bit of salaries that was as well picked up for the COVID liaison and for the health office paraprofessionals. I think there was one of them that was still some salary that was accumulated for COVID.
Margaret?
Sorry, and maybe my question actually probably should have come under the financial report, but in both, I'm not seeing, so did we not have to tap into the non-lapsing fund with the town?
We did not.
Cover everything, okay. So do we know what happens? They just
It stays with the town, and I believe because it was a reserve on their fund balance, it can be either stay as a reserve on their fund balance, or they'll probably roll it into the non-reserve part of the fund balance.
Right, okay. Thank you. Yeah, because I think there was a 1 year.
Yeah, right.
All right. Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
All right. So we'll move on to some items of information and start with the enrollment report.
Okay, thank you. So each month you see our changes in enrollment from the prior month. Although it was the last month of our school year, you will see that our trend continued with some minor ins and outs at the different levels with a net positive increase. And in this month, there was a net positive of 6 additional students. So I think except for 1 month, we had a steady increase month over month for our enrollment.
Thank you.
And then as you also get each month, you will see any of the resignations or retirements or changes in employment status that occurred since our last Board of Education meeting. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Okay. On the enrollment report, are these students coming back to us that pulled their kids out? Is it New Yorkers moving in? Do we have any feedback on the trends? We heard Rudy say 400 people moved into town. There's got to be kids there somewhere.
So
Are we going to be meeting some new kids next year?
you're definitely going to be meeting some new kids next year, and you're also going to be meeting a superintendent that's going to say we have to plan for contingency, not only in general education, but in special education, because the horizon is not great financially when we didn't plan for that. The difference, Sean, is that not all of our children, so children at this time of the year often have the option to stay in their current school district unless they're moving out of state. So we also don't let kids stay if they've moved out of state. Outside of that, if they're within the state of Connecticut and they needed to do virtual learning this year, most of the time we allowed for that. It's the same in other communities. And so I imagine that many individuals have not re-registered that we're going to see in the fall. And based on the enrollment that we're already projecting for the fall, we expect to see increases for sure. What First Selectman Marconi said about the number of students and where they land, I think is a little bit all over the place. It's not just in one spot. So you'll hear more about that in August.
Great.
All right. So our last item of information is our 2021-2022 Board of Education meeting timeline.
It's not that exciting. It's just a bunch of dates. Although since this was printed, I started to put in some items. We'll have our Board of Education retreat. Some of the items that we talked about tonight, for example, pay to participate, booster clubs, open choice. Those are all topics that I know will be coming back up onto agenda. But that'll be discussed with the Board of Ed and Jonathan at the next retreat, and we'll start filling in some of the spaces. Some of them are staple things that we have year to year, and then some are new items that the Board of Education will discuss. So for right now, it's not that exciting. There's some dates there.
But I do think the exciting part is that as of now, we're anticipating that August 9th meeting to be in person.
We're expecting it to be in person. Typically the August 9th meeting isn't held. So we'll have to find out whether or not that first August or if it's the next August, but that's what I hear. That's through the grapevine.
Okay. Right, good. But that is exciting.
If you have summer plans, don't get too anxious yet.
Can I ask, will committee meetings be held in August then? And I'm assuming they'll be in person as well?
So that's a good question. I actually did ask our attorney, Rebecca, to guide us on whether or not committee meetings, A, need to be in person, and then B, I think the second part of the discussion is whether or not the board wants to have them in person. So we'll find out about that, Margaret. I think the executive order isn't, it's not super clear on committees, although they follow Board of Education requirements. So I think if the executive order ends, they may then be required to be back in person. So I think that's a discussion for the Board of Ed to have. A, if we're allowed to, do we want to continue to have them virtually, or do we want to have them in person? I think that there's pros and cons to both, at least for the schedules of likely board members that are rushing to get back to some of the committee meetings, because there's a lot of them, and that's a discussion item we should probably have too at some point. The second part of your question was whether or not we would have them in August. I think we'll start setting those dates, but it'd likely be late August, Margaret, when we get back up.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions regarding the Board of Ed schedule? Okay. There being none, I think we should move on to public comment. And before we begin that, I do want to express many thanks to Margaret for stepping up and taking over the public comment and the correspondent report on behalf of Rachel. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Ken. And as you can imagine, there is quite a bit of public comment tonight, so bear with me. The first one is from Tracy O'Connor. She did not leave her address, but she wanted some questions that she posed to the Board of Education to be put on record and included in the public comment. Her first question, please provide the date of the agenda meeting when public comment was changed from the beginning of the Board of Education meetings. Second question, the date of the meeting that this was discussed and voted on by the board. And the third was, were parents notified to allow for their comments before the change? That was the first public comment. Second public comment is from Diana Spence at 70 Keeler Drive. Dear members of the Board of Education, did you know that since the COVID-19 pandemic began, there have been more suicides in young people 0 to 19 than COVID-related deaths in the state of Connecticut, specifically 15 suicides and 4 COVID deaths? I didn't either until last night when I was reading comments on a Facebook forum. Now, I don't usually get my news from social media, so I went onto the state's database and lo and behold, there were the statistics. I lead with this fact because it shocked me, yet at the same time is a clear indicator on how this virus has affected our children. Transmission rates within our schools are almost non-existent, and when a case does occur, it is almost always asymptomatic. As of today, June 15th, 65.2% of Connecticut's population has been vaccinated. The vaccine is here and it's working. Infection rates are the lowest they have ever been. This summer, the governor's emergency orders expire, and there's a strong possibility he will leave masking up to our school districts. I am asking you, as a parent of a first grader and a preschooler, to seriously consider the ending of masking in our public schools. Our young children only know a school experience with masks, and though they've adapted, we all know this is not normal. The long-term effects of mask wearing is just starting to be studied. I can tell you personally that my daughter, who is slightly anxious, has had issues with taking off her mask. A few weeks ago, we were visiting family in upstate New York. When we were up there, I took my daughter into a store without a mask. None were needed. As we were walking around, I noticed her face turning red. I asked her what was wrong, and she let out a big breath and said she was scared to breathe because she didn't want to die. As a parent, my heart broke. It was in that moment that I realized I cannot stay silent anymore. We need to keep our kids safe, but we also need a reality check on how this is affecting their mental health. School districts across Connecticut are already starting to lift mask mandates. It is my hope that with the continued rise in vaccination rates and the steep decline in positive cases, Ridgefield Public Schools follow suit and makes masking optional this coming school year. Thank you for your time. And then I think it looks like there was an addendum to that saying, please let incoming families participate in the survey. My daughter will be entering Ridgebury in the fall. Families with young children entering kindergarten and new to elementary should have a say. If they are registered, you should have their email addresses. Thank you. Third comment is from Julia London Gerosa, 36 Rich Drive. I am writing to express my deep disappointment in the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan draft dated June 23rd, 2021. I plan to attend tonight's Board of Ed meeting to address this with you and the board members in person, but in the event that I am unable to make it, I am now requesting from you, the board members, or any person in a position of authority on these matters, what the rationale behind requiring masks for kids is at this point. The cloth masks do little to nothing to spread disease, and half the time the kids are wearing them improperly. Kids have actually passed out from wearing them while engaged in strenuous activity. They are a constant distraction. They perpetuate fear and anxiety in these kids when the disease they purportedly protect them from is less deadly than the flu. At present, there are few to no COVID hospitalizations. Many states rescinded their mask mandates long ago and are doing just fine, if not better than states in which they continue. Teachers are vaccinated. Kids have mild to no symptoms from COVID, and the overall mortality for otherwise healthy people, adults and kids, is minimal. To say that the board is merely following DPH or CSDE guidelines or otherwise fail to provide real answers would simply not suffice under these circumstances. As I'm sure you know from having children of your own, kids are rarely satisfied with a just do as I say or because I said so response. Why then should adults accept such answers? We need actual evidence-based support for these continued mandates. Childhood is fleeting. These are years our kids will never get back. My older son is starting middle school this fall, and while there may be many new faces I would like to get him to know, I want him to comfortably run around with his friends at recess, to hug them and high five them, play football with them, and recognize the range of human emotion he will never understand if these mask mandates continue. Our kids deserve better than this. The next public comment is from Kira Friedman, 773 Ridgebury Road. After seeing the proposed safety guidelines publicly posted for Ridgefield Public Schools and given the recent data for the state of Connecticut, it's very frustrating to see the mask policy still in place for students and teachers alike. Where is the emergency currently? Are we no longer following the facts and science? We all know that children are not the key to the severe spread of COVID-19. Vaccinations have been administered to most of those who fall into high-risk categories here in Connecticut. I'm writing to you today to ask that you strongly consider making masks optional for the 2021-22 school year, especially for the younger children who need to develop healthy social skills, learn proficiency in language, and appropriate emotional expression. The data simply is not there to support these children in masks all day, even with mask breaks. The breaks are minimal and insufficient. Other Connecticut districts have already officially announced that masks will indeed be optional for 2021-22. Please consider the community as a whole when making these decisions. Let's just let this be a family's individual choice. Thank you, Liz, for your input regarding masks on our youngest learners. The next comment is from Allison Adrian, 19 Belvedere Court, Ridgefield Board of Ed. I'm a new resident to Ridgefield. I recently moved with my family from North Stamford. My children attended St. Aloysius School in New Canaan. I recently read the Diocese of Bridgeport has made masks optional for all Catholic school students for the next school year. As RPS Safe Return School planning begins for the 2021-22 year, I'm asking you to consider making masks optional for our children and follow the diocese lead in the movement. The emergency we faced in early 2020 is well behind us. Cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are extremely low. Effective treatments now exist, and our state is among the top in vaccination rate. Furthermore, 16 plus months of data clearly shows that children are at an almost zero danger of severe illness or death from COVID, and due to their largely asymptomatic expression of the disease, are not major catalysts for the spread of COVID. The other thing we know after 16 plus months of data is that isolation, remote learning, and masking have led to a huge increase in negative psychological outcomes, including suicide, and an epidemic of anxiety and depression in children. These actions have also set countless numbers of children back in their education, especially our very youngest children, who rely on facial recognition to learn to speak and process social cues. To mandate another year of forced masking when an emergency situation no longer exists is just unnecessary. I implore you to make mask wearing for the 2021-22 year school optional and allow parents to choose what they feel is right for their children. The next public comment is from Liam Tully, 192 North Salem Road. I think it is completely overkill at this point to require our kids to wear masks in school for the coming year. By this point, we are all aware that 70% of the adult population is vaccinated or has already been exposed to COVID-19. By following the science, we are also well aware that the probability of serious illness is extremely low in children, and so is the likelihood of spreading the virus. Let's stop punishing our children and let them begin to enjoy their childhood once again. The prolonging of enforcement of safety measures is now beginning to be an abuse of power and should be stopped. We cannot live in fear any longer. At this point, masks should be elective for those who wish to wear them. I would appreciate a vote on this policy being repealed. The Board of Education is busy worrying about electric buses to save the environment while our most precious asset is left to endure this never-ending power play of COVID-19. It's over. Face it. Next public comment is from Linda Kim, 10 Nutmeg Ridge. I feel glaringly a minority in so many ways, especially after hearing multiple times overwhelming number of emails from families in favor of one perspective. Can we agree that, as with most organizations, those who agree with current practice choose to accept and stay quiet instead of raising concerns? How many families are there in the RPS system, and how many emails did we receive that it's enough to give the BOE to write on behalf of the parents? I agree with what Margaret, Kathleen, and Tina shared and appreciate that someone acknowledges we need to see what the general public thinks as opposed to one subset. Can we please rely on the science and prove and reviewed data as opposed to conjecture and opinions? This will not be a scientific survey. If and when a response is drafted to the governor, can you please give a background perspective of how many responses you get and are basing your letter on? I have issue with a board drafted letter relying on last-minute 3-day window survey being the basis of a community and speaking on my behalf. Last comment is from Gigi Christel, 19 Main Street. Why would the district survey the community? Why would the district survey the community about a public health decision with respect to mask wearing? I want the district to make decisions about public health based on what the medical and public health experts say, not from the results of a public survey, where some people are guided by emotions rather than medical guidance guidelines. Thank you to the administrators who are working so hard on the fall reopening plan. Let me just make sure there wasn't any more that came in after that. Okay, that is it as far as the public comment goes. And then as far as correspondence to the board, the correspondence report for June 28th as of 4:20 this afternoon, we've received 19 emails since our last regular Board of Education meeting. 1 email opposed the implementation of the open choice program in Ridgefield. 2 emails regarded curriculum. 1 email regarded how to ask a question during a Board of Education meeting. 14 emails provided feedback on the Safe Return Plan. 13 of those emails opposed the mask policy currently stated in the plan, and 1 was in support. 1 email was in regard to public comment. And that's it.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, there being no further business on our agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Liz, can I get a second? Tina, all those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous, 6. Thank you all very much. Everyone stay safe, and we'll see you at the retreat.